Hi guys and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, and in this episode, I will be reading the first chapter of my book, but I want to leave you with a few thoughts before the holiday weekend. First, I want to start by saying happy holidays to those who don't celebrate Christmas and Merry Christmas to those who do. For many people, 2020 has been a crazy year and a disabling ordeal, whether they've lost their business, their job, a loved one, or just the sanctity of mind that comes with a sense of being able to predict the norms of everyday life. It is a fixed point in time that we will collectively never forget, but will most certainly, if we can survive it, mentally recover from. By now, it's obvious to many people that COVID itself is the environmental factor for triggering much of today's mental illness, circling around anxiety, depression, and insomnia. And in time, environments do change, and we will feel better about this past year, and we will feel more hopeful about our future. But because psychiatry's main philosophy is structured around their biomedical model, they continue to assert that mental illnesses are biological issues rather than environmental ones. Anyone that knows me is also well aware that I am against psychiatric labeling, and that is because I have suffered a lifetime of psychological abuse imposed by the very institution that claims it is there for my own mental health. Psychiatry uses the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, as the standard reference for the classification and treatment of psychiatric conditions. DSM-5 now contains up to 374 mental illness labels. Almost every facet of human behavior can now be viewed as a symptom of mental illness. Psychiatrists made normal grief, for instance, a mental disorder as far back as 2013 under the DSM-5 that removed the bereavement exclusion from its prior edition, which had allowed a normal person dealing with appropriate grief after the loss of a loved one to be excluded from receiving a lifelong diagnosis of major depressive disorder. Now, DSM-5 allows a griever no more than 2 weeks to 3 months to get over it. A member of the DSM-5 task force and the editor of the DSM-4, psychiatrist Michael B. First, claimed the DSM is the most effective diagnostic tool out there. An expert in his field, Michael admitted at a seminar I attended at Wesleyan University in February of 2019 that psychiatry's diagnostic criteria is only descriptive, while at the same time he assured the audience, "We haven't found any biomarkers yet, but they are out there." Really? With no evidence? How is he so sure? And how long are we going to search for something we can't find? Psychiatrists aren't open to anything else because it threatens their positions of power. One of the main criticisms of the DSM-5 were the changes made to the definitions of mental disorders, placing more emphasis on biological theory than on socio-environmental factors. The overdiagnosed ADHD label, for instance, is now a neurodevelopmental disorder, suggesting a definitive biological basis, although that cannot be proven. The field knows the truth. In an October 2017 document by the WPA Lancet Psychiatry Commission on the Future of Psychiatry, under the heading of diagnostic assessment, they write in their own words, quote, "One of the holy grails of clinical psychiatry is laboratory tests to assist in diagnostic assessment, a standard component of diagnosis in many other medical specialties. Existing definitions of mental disorders are based exclusively on subjective signs and patient-reported symptoms that are prone to recall, error, and misinterpretation. Laboratory tests have potential advantages, including being more objective and facilitating the detection of mental disorders in primary care settings, in which the use of laboratory tests is routine. Guys, This is a standard healthcare practice in the 20th and 21st century. Any disease that your doctor may believe you have, you get a test for to conclude if it's positive or negative. This is old hat. Why are we still accepting this bullshit? It's biological, but there are no tests that prove it. How is that scientific? And again, stated very clearly, I continue. Quote, unfortunately, although one of the goals of DSM-5 was to make the diagnostic system more based on the underlying pathophysiology of mental disorders than on their symptomatic presentations, no laboratory tests or other biomarkers were deemed to be sufficiently sensitive and specific to warrant their inclusion in the DSM-5 diagnostic criteria sets for any of the mental disorders. One of the causes of the failure of studies searching for useful diagnostic biomarkers might be the erroneous assumption that the DSM categories represent true disease entities. End quote. Psychiatrists believe in medical labels for life with no biological diagnostic evidence. As a psychiatrically labeled mental defective under their theories for the last 27 years, I can assure you I have been mentally healthy for decades, but not according to their subpar standards and certainly not according to my records. Now, why should you care, and how does this relate to you in the age of COVID? Studies are coming out every day on this, but I came across one covered by both NPR and CBS News, and I'm sure many other media outlets, in Lancet Psychiatry, published on November 9th of 2020, titled Bidirectional Associations Between COVID-19 and Psychiatric Disorder. The findings showed that 1 in every 5 people who is diagnosed with COVID also received a psychiatric diagnosis in the following 14 to 90 days, compared with 6 other compromised health events. This time frame is consistent with the revised DSM-5 time frame for bereavement circumstances. You got 2 weeks to 3 months. That's all you get. And then you're mentally ill with no test given. Accept it, take the meds, and gear up for a substandard existence forever. The most frequent psychiatric diagnosis after a COVID-19 diagnosis was anxiety disorder, among which the most frequent were adjustment disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and panic disorder. Other findings show that patients with COVID-19 who required inpatient admission were at a higher risk of psychiatric conditions than patients not requiring admission. Because when you are in the hospital, the expert doctors like to be loose with doling out lifetime psychiatric labels. I know this for a fact. The study has limitations that they admit to. A big one is that we do not know whether these diagnoses were made in primary or secondary care, nor by whom. Healthcare centers were closed as a result of lockdowns, which influenced how patients were diagnosed. And yet, if COVID-19 has proven nothing else, it has shown that mental illness and mental health are correlative to what people are experiencing in their lives. They are not isolated. We are not islands. We are social human beings, and many things have taken place this year that would cause mental distress. Sorry, guys, but psychiatry is not science, and anyone who tells you it is not acquainted with the field. Science has proven itself to work wonders with what we know and have learned about COVID in less than a year. Therapeutics have been found, theories have been proven sound or unsound through evidence, and even vaccines have been developed in record times compared to the past. But the science of psychiatry has been looking for a diagnostic biological test for over half a century, and it befuddles them that they still haven't found it. Not sure if I know what I'm talking about? Then listen to the first chapter of my book, Not as Crazy as You Think, and hear my personal account of what that wretched label has personally done to me. Chapter 1. The St. Paddy's Day Lockdown. We had all been stuck in time since India, but it was on St. Paddy's Day 2017 when disaster quantum finally hit. A burst of creative inspiration seized me that morning with a fast-flowing gust of enlightenment that just had to be recorded before my body painting gig at 8 p.m., which was scheduled 3 months earlier and organized for weeks. A model was coming down from Albany for the event and one coming up from Manhattan to be body painted for a clothing designer's birthday party at a soul food restaurant in White Plains, New York, where I had worked before. I was the entertainment. Then suddenly, just as I was getting ready to take a shower so that I could drop Jack off at his dad's and hit the road, I noticed my parents on my porch with desperate fear plastered across their faces. Oh no, what's going on now? I had seen those looks in their eyes before, and I knew I was in trouble. Within seconds, they barged into my home and began pacing nervously about my kitchen like they had a very important task at hand. And with pressured and urgent speech, they began, "You have to come with us, Jennifer. We called your psychiatrist, and he wants us to take you into the hospital for blood work." With my past experience, I knew this phrase was a decoy. I never was released with just blood tests alone. "Ma, I am not crazy. When are you going to stop this nonsense? A equals A, for Christ's sake. Crazy equals crazy. Not crazy equals not crazy. Wake up from the brainwash, Ma." My father chimed in. "We don't think you're crazy, Jennifer. We are just trying to help you. You're going into an episode." I pleaded with him to stop Daddy. Think about what crazy means. Nazis are crazy, and crazy equals crazy. When are you going to wake up? They never could see our dense gravity system as I could, with past, present, and future all happening at once. Gravity was time in our matrix, but I seemed to be the only human alive who had the capability of feeling its fluctuation. Just as time was slowing down again on my side, their time appeared to be speeding up. "I am not going anywhere. You come into my house and demand I should leave with you? For what reason? Why weren't you answering our calls?" cried my mother. I am a grown woman in my 40s, and since India, if I don't answer my parents' phone calls, I am chastised and suspected to be going into an episode. Because I've been writing and I wanted to concentrate and not be disturbed. In my family's conditioned minds, my commitment to my work was somehow a symptomatic emergency, and I was using words like Nazi, which to them was a sure sign a catastrophe was brewing. "Well, your psychiatrist said to bring you in." "On what grounds?" "Jack called Joe and he said you were acting different." I couldn't deny it. On any given day, having an explosive creative session would have been no big deal. I walk around, smoke a cigarette, and talk to my guides a bit. I furiously scrawled notes on scraps of paper throughout my house as I cut and paste and collage away, helping me focus my ideas. When amused by my own creative genius, I might even chuckle out loud when a good sentence strikes my imagination before I write it down. All of these actions inside the creative process of a writer are normal. Yes, normal. I had finally learned over the years that my brain is functioning normally when I go about taking such actions. But Jack, who was 10, stayed home sick from school that day, and as I was steadfastly committed to staying in the zone, to him I was acting out of character, which propelled him to call his dad. And Joe, because he was so busy at work, instead of getting in touch with me personally, decided to call my parents to check up on me. And so the nightmare had begun. "So you already spoke to my psychiatrist?" "He's my psychiatrist. He's supposed to be my advocate, not yours." "Jennifer, we are not leaving until you get into the car with us." They relented. "Well, you can wait here all day, but I'm going to get ready for my gig." I ignored them, and as I took my shower, I heard them carrying on, riling in anxiety, crying out to the gods, asking why, oh why do they have to put up with this in their lives? Why can't our daughter just behave like everyone else and be normal? They had simply had enough of my ways. When I finally stepped out of the bathroom, they said, "Okay, we spoke to your psychiatrist again, and he said if you don't come with us to take you into the police station." I could not believe my ears. He spoke to them directly twice and not to me at all. I knew I was being completely and wrongfully judged, and now for sure was going to be persecuted. There was nothing left to do but comply with this idiotic program. The last thing I wanted to do was bring the law into this, because as bad as the psychiatric institution was, they were at least predictable. I had no idea what massive monster the law had grown into as of late, and I was terrified of what they'd do to me for being overly creative. Fine, I'll go with you, but I'm only going for blood work. Then I have to get to my damn gig. Jack didn't know what was going on. He only saw his mother upset and tearing up. This was the backdrop of my life, and Jack before had already witnessed panic breaking loose when my family and his father had insanely overreacted to my sanity. For decades, they had been locked into a twisted myth, believing that they were protecting society from my creative mind, that when it would explode into clarity, they always presumed was lunacy. I told my son, Jack, no matter what they say, I am not crazy. I'm very smart. And someday you'll see that very clearly, hopefully someday soon. I know, Mommy, you're like me, he said, holding my hand tight in the back seat of my parents' prison vehicle. I was brought into the emergency room of Mount Kisco's Northern Westchester Hospital for blood work, and the old procedure had just begun. I was used to this, no questions asked of me except my age, weight, and date of birth. Separation from my parents was imperative, who were usually the oppressors in the matter, as this persuasion of my craziness had continually been beaten over their heads over the years. I was brought into a sort of detention room and spotted the standard cameras above, and I knew I was being taped. It was becoming dreadfully obvious to me with every passing second what was, in fact, really happening to me, which was a denial of my civil rights as an American again, not an episodic breakdown of a bipolar defective, which they had begged me my entire life to buy into. And now, because of psychiatry's explanation of who I was as a human being, I was a mentally ill potential criminal by the state. Feeling threatened, I said, I am just reminding you and being fully clear. Everything you say here is being recorded. I am protected by the United States Constitution. I told this to Dr. Catherine Harding, the psychiatrist now standing before me as my overlord, who was given full control over my life. For a few moments, I honestly believed she was a clone because that robotic tone in her voice had less inflection than Siri. I meant it what I said. I knew full well what was going on was another revocation of my civil liberties, and I felt she should know that in my future writing about this sham, anything she said could be used against her. But again, to a psychiatrist, that statement sounded as if I believed myself to be rigged with recording devices on my body as a secret agent with my satellite crew nearby watching the goings-on of this fiasco through the TV. I'm tired of this Nazi system, I mumbled under my breath. What are you saying about the Nazis? She asked me. I'm calling it a Nazi system because I'm marked. I have a number. I am a Jew. Dr. Harding then said, Jew? Why are you using the word Jew? Because like the Nazis gave their marks to the Jews, I have the mark of bipolar disorder attached to a pharma code for insurance records. I have a number. I am a Jew. These are called concepts. Nazis oppress Jews. I am a Jew, I repeated. She appeared nervous, and she took a long look at me as I stared straight into her soulless eyes. Then she left the room. A nurse then came in and told me to remove all my clothes and put on some inmates' garments. Why do I have to put these on? The psychiatrist wants you to change. With humiliation, I knew where this was going, and I did so reluctantly, my tough attitude beginning to weaken as their whips began to crack. Don't you think what they are doing is wrong? There is no reason for this, I said to her. The nurse looked meek and a little afraid. For what? For what reason? There is no reason for this, I repeated. She answered dejectedly, I know. I then said to her, as a woman of color, I think you should care. She remained silent, but thoughtful as her eyes softened into mine. Isn't there a way to stop this nonsense? Well, not anymore, she answered. Things are different now. There's nothing anyone could do. She was holding back a whimpering sadness. I was about to put on the top garment when she said, You have to take it off. Hospital policy. What? Why do I have to take off my bra? It's just one of the rules. I don't see the point in taking off my bra. It's not a breast exam. I was feeling more violated as each leg of this latest protocol was unfolding. This is completely unreasonable. She left the room to see if the doctor would allow it as I stood there shirtless and in blue concentration camp pants, my hands cold as ice, shivering because there was no heat in the room. When she came back, she said with a tinge of pity, You have no choice. You need to take it off. It's policy. You gotta be kidding me, I said. Sorry, I have to stay here until you do it. Instant degradation and blatantly inhumane treatment. How far can you break down a mental case Jew before they take your God away? In any hospital emergency room, taking off an undergarment was not asked of you without reason, certainly not demanded of you. Do they think I was going to strangle myself with it? I almost wished I had suicidal tendencies. It would put a final end to these ongoing nightmare atrocities that were the tapestry of my life. I then turned with disgust toward the camera, dropped my bra in front of it, and said, "There! Now I have my bra off. Is everyone happy? I am a true Jew," and dropped my head. The situation I now found myself facing was increasingly becoming darker and more ominous to me, threatening me on a level of oppression I had never known before. What was really going on here? How many times do I have to be pulled away from my life into their insane program of rat cages and zoo bars? It has to happen again and again forever until the day I die, with my son continually taken away from me in the process. For what? Dr. Harding walked back in the room, acting a little differently, like she was changing her strategy, and said, "Now, all this stuff about Nazis and Jews, you know we are trying to do what's best for everyone, right?" I tried my best to keep up with the clone and said, "Well, what is the purpose? I mean, really, what is the purpose of what you are doing? Just tell me why you think I need to stay. For what? What is the reason? Why do I need to stay here? Just let me go home with my family. I want to speak to you together with my family so that I know what is being said. Your family is being held in the other room. We are talking to them, and they are concerned," she answered flatly. Concerned about what? I am reminding you that I am protected by the United States Constitution, and you have no right to put me away for a reason that cannot be explained to me, even by you. We looked up your records. You have a history of living with bipolar disorder. Yeah, I know. That's the mark you gave me 20 years back. I don't see my personality as a disorder. I see it as a gift," I said. "Well, let's just agree to disagree on that, shall we? You'll be staying here, and I am the one to make that decision. I am a doctor, after all." "But what do you have on me? Do you need to see my resume to see that I am a successful woman in my field, that I am a contributing member of my community? You know nothing about me, so how can you make decisions regarding my life? I have proven myself in my art career and in my success with professional relationships and dear friends on every level. Doesn't that factor in? Do I need to bring every one of my friends in here to vouch for my character? I want to know, what is the purpose of this? What is the reason? I want to speak to another person. I want my voice to be heard." Through over 20 years of complying with this invasive psychiatric institution, no matter how successful I had become or happy and well-balanced, they had stuck to this idea about me that I could relapse at any given moment because the DSM, or Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, forecasted such a thing. None of my accomplishments over the years had meant anything to them. My personal value was never taken seriously. I never had a chance to be seen as sane before they assumed I was insane. I had come so far in my career and in my life, one that was fulfilling and healthy, but the world was on fast motion into oblivion as it continued to submit to this psycho-punishing medical treatment to make one back to normal. "I am the head doctor on this unit, and I am managing your case," Dr. Harding asserted. "What you are doing is wrong," I said. She responded, "If you'd like to put your wish to be discharged in writing, we will review it, and then you can take it to court next Friday." And I cut her off. "Whoa, court? You have already decided that I'm in for at least a week until next Friday? For what? Just tell me. For what? For what reason are you doing this? For what reason? Your parents are concerned." She spoke down to me as though I was still that young girl of 22 who had just come home from India. "I am a grown woman of 45 years old. My parents can't put me away in your prison camp for no good reason. I wish to speak to them." She ignored me. Over the years, my poor parents had been conditioned to such a degree that they couldn't even see me anymore as their daughter. They had been told by the psychiatric institution to watch vigilantly for my behaviors, for triggers of a relapse in my bipolar disorder. This viciously savage think tank had successfully trained my unsuspecting parents to believe that it was the best thing to do for the safety of humanity at large to barge down the door of my house, grab the Jew as quickly as they possibly could, and then with the threat of punishment of criminal law, lock me up in the nearest asylum. Seeing as the headmaster clone wasn't budging, I had no choice but to comply, because noncompliance could be held against me in the court if I needed to go. But I knew it was a hoax and a crime, as well as a violation of my Sixth Amendment, or rights of the accused, which states that before my freedom is deprived, I must be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against me, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in my favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for my defense. All of which are nullified based on my mentally ill status, which provided me no civil rights to claim as my own. They didn't need to explain to me why they were revoking my freedom, putting me away in a mental asylum, and taking me away from my son, but I needed to appeal to a judge in a court of law next week and somehow explain how I got myself in there? Well, if I had to, I had to, but this so-called mental health system was a disgusting sham. I said, okay, I'll stay the night, fine, but I know my rights. I can get out tomorrow in 24 hours if I so choose. Well, I, as the psychiatrist handling your case, will determine upon further observation when you are ready to go home. Who the hell was this witch to tell me that she had the right to be the only one to have say over when I went home? That only she had the authority and the expertise to conclude if I was a good enough mother to see my son again. I was caught in a Twilight Zone episode from hell. You have no right to do what you are doing because it is unconstitutional and illegal. There is nothing we are doing that is illegal. We have every right to retain you. We are completely protected by the law in retaining your rights. It was true. On behalf of the general welfare and protection of society, civil commitment may be initiated by anyone concerned about bipolar behavior, whether they be family members, mental health providers, or the police. They are responsible for making the decision that is in the best interest of the bipolar reject by most clearly reflecting the choice the mentally ill individual would have made if she was competent to do so. New York State's Kendra's Law, which is backed by the American Psychiatric Association, protects the police to show up at someone's doorstep and escort the patient to the clinic for their antipsychotic injection if they have not kept their medication appointments. It also provides grounds for forced hospitalization against a person's will based on their diagnosis alone. So there was nothing I could say to stop this hospital from seeing this so-called episodic incident as a medical emergency requiring immediate treatment because of the severity of that bipolar label. Dr. Harding was preparing to hand me a pill and said I should take it. I'm not taking any other medication. I am already taking my medication and I am not taking another. Well, it's an antipsychotic. I think you should take it. No, I will not take it. I'll agree to an increase in my sleeping med, Seroquel, but nothing more. I don't need an antipsychotic, for Christ's sake. Oh, how I knew once you go on any given psych med, it was next to impossible to convince a psychiatrist to wean you off. An existence given over to antipsychotics at this point in my life would in finality kill any spirit or soul I had left, for I had come so far. The headmaster appeared frustrated with me because I wasn't complying to her stick in hand. She left the room and shut the light. There were no windows, and it was pitch black. I laid there, pathetically humbled, brutally beaten psychologically, spiritually weakened, freezing in that cold, empty room alone. I begged them to at least get in touch with my client at the body painting gig I was expected to be at that night, to notify him I wasn't showing up. But no one listened or cared, as if a grown man's birthday party didn't matter, and putting a grown woman away as fast as they possibly could was the most responsible thing the system could do for the benefit of the larger community. I pleaded with the nurses who wandered in and out to get someone to call my models who were traveling hours to meet me, but I lay prostrate in inmates' clothes, with my voice trailing off into a dissipating ether as they chose not to hear. My life and people within it didn't matter. They weren't real. Only the threat of my potential imagined crazy actions implied by my wretched label kept me there. But nothing in the real world was committing me. In my real life, I was nothing to them. Nothing more than a number. About 30 minutes had gone by, and then a nurse came in to inform me they had already made my bed in the asylum. They took away my belongings, necklace, clothes, boots, personals, IDs, bag, and phone, even socks and my hair rubber bands that I kept on my right wrist. Stripped of all dignity once again, my voice was unheard and my personhood disrespected. I thought of human rights activist and author of Night, Elie Wiesel, who wrote about his experiences as a Jewish prisoner in the Nazi concentration camps during World War II. In his Nobel lecture given on December 11th, 1986, he said, "Each one of us felt compelled to record every story, every encounter. Each one of us felt compelled to bear witness. We thought it would be enough to tell of the tidal wave of hatred which broke over the Jewish people for men everywhere to decide once and for all to put an end to hatred of anyone who was different. The people around us refused to listen, and even those who listened refused to believe, and even those who believed could not comprehend. Of course they could not. Nobody could. The experiences of the camps defies comprehension. Have we failed? I often think we have. No, Ellie, you have not failed. They have failed. They have failed you as they have failed me, the sleeping masses." I cried softly and felt his words seep into the bottom of my soul. I began to split off into my own mind, for I felt protected there, as this real world around me was devolving right before my eyes into a zombie apocalypse with the clones in charge gassing us mentally ill nutjobs during that long night as we filed in one by one. What was this world coming to? I couldn't bear the violent cruelty of it any longer. I never did see my parents again that night, and I knew that sadly, going forward, this psychiatric institution had permanently destroyed the relationship I had built with them over the years for good. They had succeeded in separating kin. But Ellie told me to be strong. I may have been entering their concentration camp as a marked Jew, but now there was nowhere they could hide. This bogus incarceration made it official. Psychiatry has nothing to do with real science and everything to do with the revocation of civil liberties. The doctors were backed up by law to continually have the right to take over my life, and the only thing I could do to fight such a thing was to go to court and lose. This was not the world I prayed to come home to when I was stuck in India. It was time to embarrass them once and for all by showing who the real crazies are. And trust me, I'm not as crazy as you think. Captain, gravitational pulls are fluctuating in this sector. It's very unstable. They're being pulled into a dwarf system, Captain. Their 9th planet, Pluto, was the first to get sucked in. Captain Spock understood. It seems that on this timeline, these humans are seeing less and less of their reality. At one time, they imagined the consciousness of the cosmos, but now they only see their own solar system and every solid form of matter within it. Their reality consists of dendrites, amino acids, black holes, and split atoms. This logic system can only mean one thing. On this timeline, a woman is to save the world. End of chapter 1. Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.